Welcome to
That's I Praise,
a Nicolas Cage podcast.
I am your host, VH Zest.
I am your other co-host, Captain Nostalgia. What is going on, my friend?
Bum. This week, we're talking about I'm sorry. We're not that productive. We're talking about the Croods.
I am. This is the third podcast I host, so.
Wow, okay. Let's see how it is. Micah, you want to do a guest spot on our other podcast and talk about Mandy? Sure, Josh.
Oh, I'm saving you for the Munsters.
Ooh, sick.
Yeah, so this is one that we've been, I think, talking about for a while, but we wanted to do some more wholesome content. Especially after the last couple of months.
Yeah, last month especially, like we did 8mm, and we liked it. It's a good film. We did it to just honor like the anniversary of Joel Schumacher's death. But it hit us afterwards. It was like, wow, we're overdue for a family film.
Yeah, we've covered. So we've done 2 live episodes, which are both family affairs with Spider-Verse and Teen Titans Go to the Movies. And then I think we've only ever covered one other family movie on Cage, and that was It Could Happen to You.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, even then, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, you know, if you throw a dart at the dartboard of Nicolas Cage's filmography, you're going to get more points if you get a family movie. You know, like, he just has probably fewer of them than other things. But we're really stoked to talk about a couple of them because he has Croods 1 and 2. We talked about doing Family Man. That was another one potentially for doing tonight. We're definitely going to do that in the future. So we're really stoked.
All right, so before we go ahead and get started with this, I have a trivia fact for you that connects our last episode on 8mm to this movie, and that would be that this is the second movie in which Nicolas Cage and Catherine Keener have played husband and wife, the first one being 8mm.
Yeah.
Which we covered last month.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. Did we plan that? I didn't plan
I
that.
did not. But this is the third movie that they've been in together. Because you have 8mm, you have Adaptation, which was an earlier episode, and then you have the Croods.
Yeah. And this movie, it's a little, I don't know. I feel like I'm late to the game on this one. Josh, you've seen this one before. This one came out in 2013, and tonight was my first viewing of it. I think my mom likes it or has seen it and said something about it, but it's my first viewing, and yeah, Josh, what are your just blanket, first impression thoughts on this one?
Well, as you've said, this is my second viewing.
Totally.
Because I watched the first one in preparations for the Croods: A New Age, which we're going to be doing next month. And this is also the first time that we've done a split up a sequel or a duology that Cage has done.
That's true. National Treasure and Ghost Rider.
Book of Secrets are both compacted into one episode.
Yeah.
So quite an interesting start to do that for. But I was not a huge fan of this the first time I watched it. And I really enjoyed the second one. I'm going to show my hands on that a month early. But I think this, on a second viewing, definitely grew on me. It's definitely a lot better the second time around than it was the first time, I think.
Yeah, I think this movie is fun. I think it's lighthearted. It's on the border. I don't know if I've ever said this. It's almost too lighthearted. Like, this movie is not, like, it's not a little kid's movie. It's like a family movie. There's something in it that's kind of for everyone. But it's like, I'm always kind of biting my nails when it comes to movies sometimes, especially like family movies, because there's always like 2/3 of the way into the movie, there's always like that big, like, drastic dip in tone where like something sad or bad happens, and it's raining and the music changes and it's like, this is stressful. I just want the movie to be good again. Quote unquote good. And this movie never really gets there. This movie is pretty even keel. I wouldn't say it's happy-go-lucky the whole time. It does have a sense of drama. It does have a couple of realer points. But overall, like, this movie is really just light and just really easy to make it through.
See, I would say the opposite for this first film. I would say this is more kids-oriented, and the second film is more family-oriented.
Okay, interesting. I didn't feel like it was like, I don't know. I feel like kids movies, like kids movies, are often like just aggressively simple, and I didn't feel like that.
So I would say this isn't necessarily like a modern day like kids movie, because I feel like modern day speaking, like kids movies are like really dumbed down jokes, and they're like aimed for kids.
Yeah,
like,
Marvel. Got it.
Another podcast for another day. But I feel like when you look at like the movies we grew up with, like Aladdin, Lion King, like these were movies that were aimed at kids, but it still had a lot of like, there were still like jokes in it with that were like in the families. And so I think you have like characters like Grug and also Guy that, you can kind of explore those like more like dad jokes with. So like they have jokes in here that are for the family.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say that because of like the way that those specific like more adult quote unquote adult jokes hit, they're never like Pixar to where it feels like there's a dirty like undertone to it.
Yeah.
Or perverted undertone.
Yeah.
And that's why I say this is more for kids. This is more kids family.
Yeah.
Than a family film.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. But this movie, it's pretty chill. It's pretty fun. Basically, it's just this caveman family, and they're very, very primitive. And the beginning of the movie explains how like they used to have friends and neighbors, but all those got killed some way or another. And so the dad of this family, his name is Grug. He's played by Nicolas Cage. He is overprotective, to say the least, about his family. Like they spend days and days on end in their cave with the rock shut over the doorway, and they only come out to hunt, and they always stay together, and that's kind of like where you start.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, and I don't know if necessarily that's like the starting point you wanted to start in. But I have a trivia fact that I would love to start with.
Let's do it.
Because this movie almost didn't happen.
Wow.
So I have two trivia facts that will come into play about the production of this movie, but I'll read the second one later. But this is a little bit of a lengthy paragraph quoted from the IMDb trivia page on The Croods. Before the film's release, DreamWorks Animation was suffering from major box office disaster returns and generally mixed word-of-mouth reception of 2012's Rise of the Guardians, which I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's the movie with like Jack Frost, Alec Baldwin is Santa Claus.
I thought that movie was okay.
Yeah. That's generally the most reaction that most people have.
Yeah.
So while Guardians did gross more than its $145 million budget, it did not turn a profit for DreamWorks due to its high budget and marketing costs, forcing the studio to take an $83 million write-down.
Jeez.
This marked the first time the studio lost money on an animated feature since Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas in 2003. As a result, this combined with other factors, in February 2013, the studio announced it would be laying off 350 employees as a part of a company-wide restructuring.
Wow. If
The Croods was what had bombed even worse than Guardians, the studio would have laid off even more employees and faced the potential possibility of bankruptcy.
Jeez.
The Croods and all of this idea of restructuring happens just a mere month and a half before the actual release.
Jeez.
So
they really they put their chips down on this movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
So The Croods then opened on March 22nd, 2013 to glowing positive reviews and a widely enthusiastic acclaim from audiences, eventually earning more than $86 million in the U.S. and over $583 million worldwide, placing its place to be the sixth highest grossing film of the year at that point.
Jeez.
Besting Oz the Great and the Powerful, Pacific Rim, Star Trek Into Darkness, and World War Z.
That's insane.
Yeah. And so it finished out 14th of the year, which is saying something. Like, any film that, just to kind of put it in perspective, there are, each studio, like major studio, puts out about 25 to 30 films a year.
Sure.
So, like, you have Fox, Disney, Universal, Sony, like Lionsgate. Like, there's so many major studios that put out like 20 to 30 films a year.
Jeez.
So even like having those 5 studios right there, that's 125 films, and this grossed 14th highest that year.
That's insane. That's amazing. I think, like, do you think it had something to do with, like, you know, the whole, I don't know, 2012 and the whole End of the World thing? You know, he had all those movies about that, and this movie, like, kind of came off the back of that craze, but, like, kind of made light of it in a way too.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It remarkably helped DreamWorks earning rise higher than $162.8 million to $213.4 million in the second quarter of 2013. One of the best financial earnings ever received in the company's history.
Jeez.
And so,
and like, this is like, we're talking Shrek and freaking like Prince of Egypt here. Like, DreamWorks is no joke.
Yeah,
especially around the early 2000s.
DreamWorks isn't a joke, because I feel like while it's like regarded as like one of the best animation studios, it is, in comparison, you also have to take into fact that it is only ever, not to play devil's advocate here, but it's only ever really stricken two major franchises with Kung Fu Panda and Shrek.
Oh yeah, Kung Fu Panda.
And, like, yes, they've done Madagascar, but Madagascar didn't do anywhere near Kung Fu Panda or Shrek numbers.
Sure. The first one, I remember the first one doing very well. But yeah, as a franchise, like, it didn't have the longevity.
No.
Yeah.
But DreamWorks has also had, like, you know, when you're talking, like, studio terms, DreamWorks has also done a lot of just, you know, truly great films like Ants, like Prince of Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
What's the one I'm blanking on? It came out, Road to El Dorado.
Yeah.
Spirit, you know, they've done so many like solid films over the years.
Definitely.
But because of gambling and other things, like, they've also taken a huge dip in stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Wow, that's wild. That's so cool. This movie did so well. And yeah, like, you know, we didn't get a sequel for, I guess it was 7 years, 2020.
Some of that has to do with COVID, though.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. That's interesting, though. And then, like, there's the series, which I understand is casted differently. But yeah, like, I can't think of another DreamWorks show that got made into, or DreamWorks movie that got made into a show. Like, even Shrek, like, never got a show. It got like 4 movies, but yeah, that's wild. Like, that's so cool.
Kung Fu Panda has also gotten the show treatment, as
Really?
has Trolls.
Jeez.
And Home. Home was a great series. It's probably the only series I've ever watched.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm familiar with that one.
Jim Parsons and Rihanna. It's a great little sci-fi film. But backing up before we started getting into trivia, you kind of talked about the opening, like probably first act of this movie. And this movie, like, I was kind of surprised as I was taking notes throughout the viewing, like how many mental health themes this was, and like the character development in this movie is so solid.
Yeah.
And Grug is as like the head of the household.
Yeah.
Has probably the most like growth out of any character in this movie.
Yeah, totally.
But it's interesting because when we first meet him, he basically leads his family with a agoraphobic leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that I just kind of thought was like really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because like, I don't know, there's this interesting moment at sort of the beginning of the movie where they look at the sun and they're like, "Hope you come up tomorrow," or something like that, and it's like, no, that was probably really a real thought. Like that's something that like, if you're, I mean, can you imagine being like way back when in a scientifically deprived, area of time, scientific advances you moved slower at one point in time, and so you're a world in which the understanding of the sun was just so limited, other than the fact that like, hey, if it weren't for the sun, plants couldn't grow, we wouldn't be warm. And even if those are your only two explanations, like that's life sustaining. That's life, everything right there. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating that there's this sort of dichotomy of like, yeah, it's like agoraphobic. Like the sun is scary. It was less to me like the sun is scary and more so like, hey, we have to protect ourselves by being inside, because they were afraid of night too. Like they were afraid of the dark too. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's really interesting. And that's something I think about like watching throughout the movie, like their fears and reactions to things just based on like a limited or no understanding at all. And it was really I feel like it was really well written, like being able to like, the writers being able to like place themselves in a position of like, we understand these things, but they wouldn't have. And it's really good.
Yeah, what I think is also interesting too is how the color of the movie kind of develops.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get this like really like muted tones throughout the first little bit of the film where you're kind of going through this agoraphobe stage, and then they're essentially forced into this journey with Guy, played by Ryan-Reynolds, making his voice acting debut.
Is this really his voice acting debut?
This was his very first time he's ever done voice acting.
Wow.
He has since gone on to do Turbo later that year, also a DreamWorks release, and also, ironically, also got a series on Netflix.
Oh, cool.
I don't think he had anything to do with it, and obviously, I think probably his most famous of any voice acting role that he's done would be Pikachu in Detective Pikachu.
Sure.
But yeah, so as they're kind of like tossed into this like this new world, this journey throughout the course of the film, the more that they kind of explore, the brighter the colors and the brighter the journey becomes.
Yeah.
And I just kind of thought that was fascinating, because it's like as these characters are starting to lose some of their agoraphobic tendencies or are starting to grow, the film and the atmosphere and the visual presence is starting to reflect that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and like, even when Eep, like first comes out of the cave at night, like there's like, and she's like chasing that fire around. It's like this weird, mysterious kind of tone because it's dark, but there's also light too, and it's very interesting. And I love the Guy character. Guy comes in fairly early in the film, and he's completely a stranger, but like he wears pants, which is completely foreign to the Croods, and he knows fire. Like he knows how to create fire. He knows what fire does. He knows kind of what it is and what its value is. And I think to me, like I personally think of like two things when it comes to cavemen. You think of the wheel, which is really not represented in this movie, and you think of like fire. You think of cavemen like inventing the wheel and then doing something with it, and you think of cavemen like inventing or stumbling upon fire. And yeah, it's really fascinating and interesting, and like that could have been the saving grace of the Croods. Like had they known about fire, not been afraid of the dark, known how to like cook food and do something more with it than just try to hunt for eggs, rather than, maybe they could have hunted for meat, then yeah, it could have been so much better for them. But it's also, it's all of a sudden like this newcomer comes and he's not just interesting because he's new, but he's interesting because like he shows them potential.
Yeah, I love the dichotomy that Krug and Guy have throughout the course of this movie. Grug, yeah. Because it rhymes with hug.
Yeah.
I love the dichotomy that they have throughout the course of this movie, But I'm curious, like you mentioned something specifically about like cavemen and the wheels, and like I've never actually done like any like serious like research into like early mankind and kind of like the caveman era and like the Neanderthal area, and I'm almost curious if like we associate as a culture a lot of that history in the same way that we associate how like the devil is based on like Dante's Inferno.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Wow, you got like real deep, real fast, and I don't know if I followed.
So you want me to break down?
Yeah.
So Dante's Inferno, like we have this like idea in our head for like place by culture that the devil is a skinny red guy with horns and a pitchfork.
Okay, yeah. So it's the caricaturized.
Yeah, so I'm almost
version,
curious
yeah.
if like, because like anytime like I've ever seen like cavemen or like Neanderthals portrayed, it's always been in like media, and it's always kind of that like same level of, you know, stereotype.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, they're, you know, big, they have leotards, giant foreheads, they're hairy, they invented the wheel, they, you know, they're rocks, you know, blah blah blah, like they grunt, you know, a lot of these like cultural stereotypes. And I'm kind of almost curious if like that is just media or if that is actually like what our history has reflected as well.
Sure. Yeah, I understand what you mean. I mean, I think like, you know, a lot of people are really big about, you know, paleontology and like excavation and showing like primate related remains with like really pronounced foreheads and you know, things like that. And you know, some people are like, they're very big about the Neanderthal thing or the missing link idea. But I think it sounds more so like what you're asking is like is like when it comes to like human ancestry, or when it comes to historical human ancestry, especially like what we are aware of, you're saying like, do we kind of treat them in sort of like a silly caricaturized light like we do the devil based on something like Dante's Inferno, you know, or like, you know, versus like thinking about, I wonder what we actually know about like our origins or these people or where the wheel came from, or, you know, that kind of thing. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Just like,
yeah, because
media
like,
influence versus like actual research and knowledge and just where people stand.
Yeah, like not to like get like too like philosophical, because like, I've never done the research into this. It's like I don't have the answers on what this constitutes as.
Yeah.
But like I've always kind of like I've always seen it. Like the nice thing about the Croods is that it breaks from those stereotypes. Like
It does, yeah.
these are real people with real fears, with real depression, with real anxiety,
Yeah.
going through real human emotions.
Yeah.
And that is something that is really refreshing because I feel like, to kind of bring another example of the cavemen from our generation is the obvious one of from Geico, So Easy a Caveman Can Do It.
Dude, I was just thinking about that. It's so good. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Like, man, do we really think of like cavemen or our origins in general as like these are stupid and simple people, or do we think of them as people? Because at the end of the day, like no matter what language you speak, no matter your cultural development, no matter what you view of science or religion or history or whatever, because I think there are some like interesting like religion versus science undertones appropriately placed in a movie about cavemen. When it comes down to it, all those things aside, like we're people, we have emotions, we react to human connection genuinely and differently, and all of that is still like much more about who we are than whether we subscribe to what's written in a book or on the wall of a cave or what's researched underground.
Yeah, and so like even like also coming back into the Croods, there's like this element of like evolution that we see throughout the course of this, and it's I want to say
this is of course assuming that the Croods takes place on planet Earth.
Yeah, that's another theory we had, is because of all the animals and the wildlife and everything, which is something I really loved about this movie. Just to sidetrack real quick.
Yeah.
It's so great. Like, what was your favorite animal that we got to see?
Do the whales. The ground whales. I don't know why. They're just like so doofy and like non-threatening. They just come out of nowhere and it's so funny.
I would probably say mine would either be like the tropical like saber-toothed cat.
Yeah.
It's like still like somehow a kitten.
Yeah.
Or there's like I don't even know what they're like called, but they're like a scarf almost.
Oh, like the lemur with one tail?
Yeah.
It was a cat dog, but a lemur tail.
Dude, it was so great.
Yeah, they were cool.
But no, it's like it's the evolution themes in this movie are like disguised as development, because like this is like saying, okay, hey, we're gonna teach you like an alternate like history where like it started out as cavemen and we progressed into Neanderthals, and then the next film kind of continues that.
Oh, cool.
I won't explain how or why.
Yeah.
But I think it was just really fascinating, and I've never seen a movie quite do that successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is really cool. I think too, like it begins to be, I think it's still to this day somewhat of like a weirdly touchy subject. Like when you bring up evolution or the potential of evolution in like a children or family movie, that there are people who would probably want to debate whether or not that has its place, and there are people who are like really big about like, do we teach this in schools? Do we not? It is just a theory. Some people believe it's not a theory, things like that. And I think they handle it really, really well, because like they let it be a setting and not
a focal point.
Not a focal point. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And they still write the Croods as people. But they do a very good job. Like I said before, they do a very good job at like writing them as a people who need and fear the sun, understandably so, on both terms, because the sun is necessary, but it is an unknown, and that is a rational response to the unknown. And that's something they write in the movie very well. Like, oh, that's new, we're afraid of it. Which is unfortunate, but also a fairly rational take.
Yeah.
If you're trying bare bones to just survive, you stick to what you know, because what you know has gotten you this far.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like in essence, like you need to kind of break out of that comfort in order to grow.
Yes, that.
But also at the same time, like, I mean, it takes a long time to like muster up. And like if I'm being like real and if I'm being like vulnerable, is like we do a lot of conventions. We try to do a lot of conventions. But I feel like the conventions sometimes where we're doing just like straight press.
Yeah.
Is a little bit harder than if you're doing a table, because if you have a table, like people have a reason to like come up and like actually talk to you, whereas if you're doing press, it's that dynamic is flipped.
Right.
So you're essentially having to like walk up to someone else, and it's kind of like almost the equivalent of like cold calling someone.
Yeah.
And like that's something that like I for as energetic as I am, like can struggle with sometimes. And I feel like I need to be reminded of like the fear that and the anxiety that I'm feeling right now is standing in the way of potential growth.
Right.
So like if I'm like going to a convention and say David Arquette is there, I don't know why he's
sick,
just randomly in my mind.
Yeah.
But let's say that like he would be there and like I have to like kind of like work up the courage to like go introduce and be like, hey, I'm from Victims and Villains. Like, this is what we do. I would love to sit down and do a podcast with you. That's kind of like out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Sure.
And I love the fact that like throughout the course of this film, you're kind of constantly seeing these characters out of the comfort of everything. Even when Eep and Guy first meet, like there is a level of fear, of an anxiety, of the unknown, because she's never seen or interacted with anyone outside of her family, and for him, he's lost his family.
Yeah,
and you also have like the fear of this unknown, because like she's never seen fire before, except for the sun. And I think this film does a really great job at kind of exploring the necessity to grow and the benefits it has on mental health, and also serves as a cautionary tale for those that choose to stay in kind of that comfort zone.
Yeah. I think it's the difference. Like, it's the simple difference between surviving and living. It's that. I think it could be termed that simply. Like, yeah, you can. I don't know. You can work your day job. You can go home. You can make your dinner. You can. You can live your life very simply. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And some people may even commend you on a simple life. And I think there are definitely merits to it. But if all you're trying to do, if you don't care about the job you work, if you don't care about where you live and who you associate with, and all you care about is just like making it to the next day, then I come to question why. Why do you even want to make it to the next day? And that's a terrible thing to want to question. But like, my point is that there's a very big difference between like living your life because you're alive and you don't know what else to do, and so you're surviving, and you're living your life because you realize that like you and the people around you are valuable, and life is an opportunity. And yeah, opportunities can be scary. But like, there's an album by a band called Zayo. It's called It's the Fear That Keeps Us Here. And like, I don't even know if this is why they named that album that, but I always think of just the name of that album because I'm like, yeah, fear will stagnate you. Like, it will force you into a position, and it will feign safety, in the name of maybe even infancy, certainly a lack of growth.
We're both huge fans of The Office, and I think the Michael Scott quote that he also quotes from Wayne Gretzky is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think that, like, what you're saying, like, there's a lot of value, I feel like, in routine and in comfort.
Sure.
But you can't ever, like, settle with it.
Right.
And one of the things that, like, I've, like, really tried working on for myself over the last year has been to be better with going with the flow.
Yeah.
And Matthew from Anamine, who is also one of our staff writers, he's such a big inspiration to me because like when you talk to that guy, like he's probably one of the most mellow guys that I've ever like worked with.
Yeah.
Ever gotten a chance to like get to know and like call friend over the last few years, and he just has like such a go with the flow attitude.
Yeah.
And like, you know, yes, he has a routine from like the times we've talked, but like he's always constantly pushing himself out of his boundaries, and like that truthfully inspires me.
Yeah.
And so like it's really challenged me as not only his friend, but also someone that, you know, works with him creatively to like say, all right, man, like I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna try and grow, and yes, I'm gonna have my routine because I work a 9 to 5, but I'm gonna be prepared for whatever that day has, and just simply just taking each day for what it is.
Yeah. I think, a lot of what we're talking about really just comes back to Nicolas Cage's character, Grug, and it's just his whole thing of like wanting safety and security and what he knows, and that's it. And even they make popcorn at one point in the movie, and it's beautiful and amazing, and they don't eat it. And they have so much of it, and they don't eat it because it's new. And it's such a shame, and I think like the kind of irony, so to me, like the irony of fear in a lot of cases is like people are afraid and they try to be controlling, maybe even to the point of manipulative. They try to have a firm grasp on their life and what they know, their boundaries, their safety, and their knowledge and what they can work and what they can have and things like that. Because the whole thing for them is like, oh yeah, I just want to know that I'm okay. I just want to know that I have security. I just want to know that like I'm provided for. And in order to have all of those things, I like want to be, and they end up having anxiety in a genuine attempt to have peace. And like those two things are very much in opposition. Anxiety is going to teach you to like try to have control over everything as much as possible, work your brains out tirelessly so that you can be okay. Whereas peace is like, hey, you don't have to be in control to be okay. Your definition of okay does not have to come from like other people's definitions and illusions of safety.
Yeah, and also too, it's a good reminder that it's okay not to be okay.
Totally.
Like, if you're not in control of a situation, that's 100% fine.
It is.
And that's something that, like, I've learned in working with other creators. That's something that I've learned in being married and being friends with people, is that I can't always 100% dictate what life is going to entail. I can't 100% predict about whatever every other person is going to do. Or how they're going to react and stuff along those lines. Yeah. And, I think there's another great scene in this movie where the families have all gotten their horns, and there's like this wave or like natural disaster that essentially pushes them and like separates and disperses all of them. And Grug is trying to be this like the leader of the house, and he says along the lines, he says his catchphrase, never not be afraid.
Yeah.
And Guy responds, you got this. And he's like this like positive reinforcement throughout the course of this like fear of like being separated, because it's the first time that we're ever come to believe that like this is the first time the family's ever been separated.
Yeah.
And I feel like that those two opposing forces saying never not be afraid and you're going to be okay really are what it feels like to have like depression, or what it feels like to go through anxiety, or suicidal tendencies, and XYZ mental health issues.
Yeah.
And because those mental illnesses are telling us that it's never not be afraid, stay inside, safety
hide.
In numbers, routine, hide. Whereas you've got this positive reinforcement that is coming in and speaking life into you and really uprooting a lot of those things and placing joy where there once was sorrow or depression or anything else. That I feel like such a great allegory for those conversations that appear in your head from someone that is still to this day struggles with that opposing factor of angel on the shoulder, devil on the shoulder.
Sure, Tom and
like,
Jerry.
Yeah, Tom and Jerry. Like it matters to know that, you know, you're not alone, but also at the same time, like, push yourself out of your comfort zone and dare to shake up the routine.
Yeah, to me, like, yeah, that's so good. So there's this scene in the movie. There's like where Grug and Guy are stuck in a tar pit, and it's like the first, maybe the only time in the movie where their roles are distinctly reversed, where Grug or Guy is like, he lost his family to a tar pit, and so his whole thing is like, this is it. There's no getting out of this. And Grug, for the first time, is like, you're a guy. You're the idea, man. If anybody can get us out of this, you can. Yeah. You know, which is a really cool moment. But also, like, to me, like, one of the more pivotal dialogues of that scene is they're talking, and Guy just, like, really hands it to Grug, where he's like, you love your family. You may fail to say it sometimes, but you love your family. And he, like, really gives it to him that, like, he really tries and wants what's best for his family. And, like, a lot of the reason I think I'm bringing that up right now is because, like, it can be really easy. And I know for me, I'm saying this to myself and about myself, like, it can be really easy to feel like you're failing because, oh man, like, all I ever do is, you know, all I ever am is anxious, or all I ever am is sad, or all I ever do is isolate, or all I ever, you know, feel is guilty, and, you know, things like that. You know, and, like, a lot of that sucks, you know, but, like, well, first of all, yeah, well, okay, so C.S. Lewis talked about, he has, like, I can't remember, like, any exact quote, but he talks about this idea that, like, the majority of what we call sin, like, for a lot of people who go through with it, what they, like, in their heart of hearts, like, what they want is not an evil itself. Like, the need for money, the need for a place to live, the need for acceptance or love or friendship or whatever, you know, the need even to some extent for things like enjoyment and pleasure, like, none of that in and of itself is inherently bad. Like, I think to some extent we're just kind of programmed to want what's best for ourselves, whether we think we deserve it or not all the time, you know. But the real big issue comes when, like, your means gets called into question of, like, oh man, like, you want this, so instead of, you want this thing, and so what you do in response to that need is you choose to be controlling, or you choose to be fearful. Like, when it comes to isolation and anxiety and things like that, like, you want safety, so what you do is isolate. Now, isolation I think it's kind of a feigning of safety. It's not really long-term safety. But I guess a lot of the reason I'm bringing this up is because, like, I need to hear, and some people need to hear, that, like, what you desire, safety, peace, friendship, love, compassion, acceptance, you know, we all have our struggles with, like, how we think about those things or how we try to attain those things. But wanting those things, like, that's okay.
Well, I think deep down in all of us, you know, despite whatever you believe, whether you believe in creation or the Big Bang Theory or any number of how we ended up here, I think at the end of the day, like, there's a net desire within all of us for creation or for acceptance, for love, for a community.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we desire that, so there's just such a powerful craving for us in here, for that. And so in terms of, when, we initially go after that the first time, sometimes it doesn't always click. And so then you get things like isolation, you get things like anxiety, you get things like never not feeling like you're good enough. And I just want to encourage people and say that, like, I've been there. Like, it took me a long time to, like, find who I would say are, like, my people and, like, my, like, genuine friends that, like, I feel like I could call on a moment's notice. And I can tell you that I don't talk to anyone that I grew up with. I'm not friends with anyone that I went to high school with. And people that I talk to now on a daily basis were people that I met well into adulthood, and people that I have bled with and cried with and have prayed over and have just been really, like, broken and joyful over. And at the end of the day, like, I would challenge anyone listening to this, or I guess encourage is a better word. If you're going through that and you feel like you haven't found your community, I would just say, encourage you to say that I don't think you found your community yet.
Yeah. There's always a place. There's always a place for people. Like, gosh, sometimes, like, you feel different. Dude, I don't know. There are so many communities in this world, whether it is like the nerd community or the punk rock community, or like, there are so many niche, weird little communities that aren't really that little. For people who, the tattooing community, there's so many artists in general everywhere. Like, there are so many places that understand the value of, like, acceptance and understand the emotion of not feeling it, not feeling accepted, and feeling strange, feeling like an outcast and things like that. Like, so whether that's, a freaking church, which it very well could be, or I don't know, anywhere. Like, there are people who care. There are people out there that, like, feel that way,
That's part of the reason why I love being a creator on TikTok.
Yeah.
It's just because, like, TikTok is one of those very random, but also at the same time, it's one of those communities that, like, you can jump into and be accepted. Like, I have a heart for the horror community. I love being in that area, that arena, and just kind of telling people about, good movies and cheesy movies, but also at the same time about who they are, and their value and their purpose and everything else like that. And I also think at the same time that with that notion, you also have a what's the word I'm looking for? You also have we also are living in an age now where it's so much easier to be accepted and to find that group like you're talking about, because, like, of things like social media and arenas like podcasting and platforms like Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, it's true. Like, social media is interesting. Like, I tend to lean toward maybe not always having a good opinion of social media, but really at the end of the day, like, it doesn't. The medium is not the point. The point is community. Whether you find that community on social media, I think there's some definite concerns with social media because of the idea of, like, catfishing, and people may not always, be who they claim to be or whatever. But even if you're just a spectator, you can still feel like, it's still a place to feel related to some extent, and, like, I found a lot of, like, where I felt like I belong and felt accepted, like, going to shows as a kid, since I was, like, 10 years old, going to hardcore shows and punk shows and metal shows, and, like, it's a weird place. And, like, not like I would walk in the room and know 50 people, but I would still walk in the room and be like, these are my people. These are the people at the end of the night. Like, we know what we're about. We know that we're here for the music. We know that we're here to like just care and have a good time. And it's a wildly wholesome place for how wild it is of a place.
What a unique way to describe that scene. But I mean, you're not wrong. Like I would also say like the horror community is that way too. And like we just did Wilkes Comic-Con this past week, and that we're recording this. It was a great convention. It was a great experience, and I believe the station that interviewed us was 321 TV. And when they interviewed me, one of the things that they said was, how do you guys feel about bringing mental health into an arena like Comic-Con? And it was really interesting because, when you talk to people that are getting into fandoms, they are getting into them sometimes because of it's a form of escapism. And also, equally, you're entering into an arena where outside of those four walls or that convention center, chances are those people might actually be alone, and or made fun of or bullied for the things that they like. And it's ultimately in that setting that they actually feel accepted and loved and honored.
Yeah, it's true. Like, man, they're like, I won't like say but so many details out loud because like I don't have anybody's permission to. But there was like definitely one, probably more, but definitely like one big moment at the convention where I was just really like, I don't know, I was really impacted by somebody, and you just never know, like you should never know like the chance you're gonna get to talk to somebody or to like just be vulnerable with somebody. Talk to somebody for their sake or for your own, but like going to a place where like people have things in common with you is a freaking great place to start for just like conquering, especially isolationism. I feel like isolationism is like a big thing with this movie and with this topic. Just the idea of like wanting to hide in a cave because it feels safe, but like it's a version of safety, but I wouldn't say that it's safe.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
And safety too is like isolation is only safe for a season.
Yeah.
So much of the Croods, I always come back to that SpongeBob episode where SpongeBob essentially has like broken his butt in a manner that if he gets into like one more accident, he gets hurt. So he resides basically staying inside of his home with Penny, Chip, and used napkin. And the entire episode is Sandy and Patrick trying to get him to come out. Yeah. And the safety that he feels is like only it's temporary, it's fleeting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an accurate description of the way that you see something like this. And again, like I've never been through anything like agoraphobia. I've never been in never felt or struggled with anything like that, but I've I've struggled with isolation. I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with anxiety. And so, like, a lot of those, like, aspects of the film, like, I can connect to and I feel like I can speak to.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a very, like, as simple of a film it is surprisingly relatable, whether it's just, like, you're a kid who wants to live their life and you have a parent or parents who, you know, maybe they feel overbearing or maybe you simply feel like you don't understand them or they don't understand you, you know, and we all at least say that we believe that our parents have our best interests in mind, but parents are imperfect and sometimes they want to have our best interests in mind, but they don't really know how. All they know is what they know, you know, and it just it's only gotten them so far, and it just is what it is, and you know. But then on the other end, like maybe you are the parent, and you feel like you just want to keep the people around you safe, and you only know how to do that the best way that you know how to do that, you know, and yeah, it's totally understandable.
Parenting's a big theme of this movie, and I don't feel qualified to talk about parenting because I'm not a parent.
Yeah.
But if you guys are how about this? How about we do this? If you guys are parents and you guys have ever struggled with any of the themes that this movie struggles with how Grug's parenting style can sometimes be a little bit overbearing or overprotective from us as the viewers, write in and tweet to us on Victims and at Victims and Villains and let us know about the mental health of being a parent, because I would absolutely love to hear that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You want some more trivia though?
I do. I really do.
All right, so. This movie, there is much a resemblance to to Plato's Fable of the Cave, a metaphor of mental limitations people are burdened by. Only a few people can learn to think outside the parameters of convention and, quote, see, end quote, the vast, diverse world of possibilities outside of their, quote unquote, cave.
That's awesome.
It's really interesting because
cool.
It brings a new, like, almost like philosophical element to this movie.
Yeah.
So I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. That's so cool. It makes me think of like 90s rom-coms and stuff, and like The Taming of the Shrew, you know, and aka 10 Things I Hate About You and stuff like that. That's really cool. I feel like you don't see a lot of that somewhat archaic, like philosophical representation. That's very cool.
Yeah, and that goes a lot of like what we've been kind of talking about. I kind of would want to read that fable now to kind of like see how
far they took it.
Yeah. Maybe that's something we could talk about in the next one.
Yeah.
Next episode. So come back for it. But before I lay down some more trivia, what did you think about Nicolas Cage in this movie?
Yo, I was gonna say, so I don't have a lot to say. I really don't. I feel like, and we talked about this kind of during the movie or just after the movie, it's very interesting that, all right, so he was Superman in Teen Titans Go to the Movies. And that was fun, but it also was just I don't know that he looked like Superman. I don't know that his voice really matched the character, but it was fun and he didn't have a lot of lines. But this movie's fascinating because Cage's voice fits so perfectly with Grug and somehow still manages to fit so perfectly with Spider-Man Noir. And it's so interesting. And I feel like Josh's wife, Erica, came in as we were kind of running toward the end of the movie. And she was like, the fact that that's Nicolas Cage's voice is really taking me out of this experience. And I thought it was funny. And she's not a big Cage fan, or not a Cage fan at all. But I genuinely, aside from being a Cage fan, think the opposite. I really thought, wow, this is the perfect voice for this character. He did, I guess I could say he did such a great job, but really it was more so it was just the perfect casting. It just was.
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking about while we were watching the movie, and I kind of thought about it, you brought it up, is that it's really interesting, like when you hear like actors use just their regular voice for roles like this.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to me because like we live in an era where that's such a norm now, but you and I grew up in an era where you had like prolific voice actors like Billy West and Phil Lamar and Tara Strong that would just kind of like use like different voices for like different characters. Robin Williams, Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
Like you had like so many voices, and then you have something like Toy Story that comes along.
Yeah.
And you have Woody, which by the way, go check out our episode, the Victims and Villains episode on Toy Story with JB Huffman from Manly Movies podcast. It's a great episode. But then you have like these two iconic actors in Tim Allen and even John Ratzenberg and Tom Hanks that are talking in their ordinary voices.
Yeah. Yeah, like everybody in that movie. But that movie is so iconic, and that has to be a factor as to why. And it's just casting. It's pure casting.
It completely changed the game of animation from then on, because not only are you now having this movie, this singular focus movie that is now saying, okay, hey, we're going to start to progress away from 2D animation and hand-drawn animation and get this 3D animation. But we're also going to have high-profile actors use their regular voice to do that, because it's not just Ryan Reynolds is not given doing anything special. He's Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Emma Stone is Emma Stone.
Yeah.
And Catherine Keener is Catherine Keener.
Yeah, I think for I brought this movie up briefly earlier, and I can't help but bring this up this movie. But like for DreamWorks, because this is not an early DreamWorks picture necessarily, right? It's not even 10 years old. But for DreamWorks, like that was Prince of Egypt. The only difference is that very few, if any, of the actors also sang their parts. But like Val Kilmer used Val Kilmer's voice. Aside from the fact that he didn't say a lot, Jeff Goldblum sounded like Jeff Goldblum, Sandy Bullock, etc. Like it was just pure, just solid casting. Yeah, and it was like, you're right, I think it like changed the game of like now we can choose voice actors based on their acting ability and not based on like whether or not they can emulate a silly voice. No disrespect to Tom Kenny or whomever still does that very well.
Yeah. So like another thing too, like that I would have you ever seen Mark Hamill do like behind the scenes of like the Joker while he's recording?
Not while he's recording, no.
So when he like records, he's
animated.
He's animated. Like he gets into it. Like
no pun intended.
He does he does like the movements and everything, and it's so incredibly cool to watch.
Yeah.
And I almost kind of like wish that like I would have had like a physical media version of the Croods, because every time I've seen it, I've always streamed it. And I would love to see like a behind the scenes video of like Nicolas Cage kind of doing the voice.
Yeah.
Because I would love to see if like he gets like animated and like goes all in, because I mean he does such a good job in this, and it's like it's really hard to like judge a performance based on like the voice. But I mean, it's all right. Where would you place this in like the animated movies we've covered so far?
The animated Nicolas Cage movies that we've covered so far?
Yeah.
You gotta remind me of all of them we've covered. So we did Spider-Man, we did
Teen Titans, and we've done this.
Wow, that's it? Just the three?
That's it. He's only ever done 4.
Oh. The sequel being the 4th?
Yes.
Come on, Nick Cage. All right.
Well, he's done more than that, but he's also done Astro Boy in 2009, and then there's a couple other movies that he's done.
That's right. He did it at anime.
He did.
That's so fascinating.
But it's not an anime because it's 3. I don't know. It's weird to explain. But anyways, continue.
Yeah. Wow. Shoot. I wouldn't put it number 3. Let me start by saying that, because as much as I love Teen Titans Go to the Movies as a movie, Nicolas Cage is like that part could have been anybody because Superman was in there so seldom. Like it was more so a trivia fact that it was Nick Cage than it was like a great role.
Yeah, let me just say that, like, I echo, like, I think Nicolas Cage, like, as Superman out of these three is definitely number 3.
It's definitely number 3. Now I have a hard time putting it number 1 or number 2 because, like, on one hand, like, Into the Spider-Verse is a far superior movie to this. That's just is what it is.
Yeah.
And he has, like, you could consider him a co-star very easily. I wish he had more lines, but he is definitely a co-star. He's definitely there, you know, probably 75%, if not more, of the movie, right? Like, so, yeah, but it's tough for me to place this number 1 because of that. But it's tough for me to place this number 2 because, like, he is the star of this movie. And he does a very good job at it.
I would place him as I would place Krug as number 1 simply because there's more range and more emotion.
And Croods as number 2 as a film.
Yes.
There you go. Cool. Yeah.
Because, like, the way that he plays Spider-Man Noir is very, like... It's very straightforward. It carries that noir tone to where there's not really a whole lot of emotions. Sure. Like, even during the emotional parts of that movie, like, but he is, like, still able to, like, convey some cool things about it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think Grug as a role, as a character, has got to be the number 1. I would say Croods is the number 2 out of the 3 as far as films go. But yeah, just Nicolas Cage, like, Grug is great. Like, it's a great casting. He carries it very, very well. Like, you almost expect him to be like, you know, it's Nicolas Cage doing an animated film, so you expect him to be. You expect the whole like A, B, C, D. You know, like you expect like the really ridiculous Nicolas Cage-isms of like, you know, like that people know him for.
I wish I'd caught that on video.
Sorry. You know, like you expect that, and you actually don't get it. You don't get it, but he still does a really good job emoting. He does a really good job with doing some of the silly voices, some of the silly noises that he does, and having like an uppity, excited, you know, scene appropriate tone without it sounding like what you might consider the memed version of Nicolas Cage.
That's what I like about this movie, and like his vocal performance in this, because like there are not many actors that I would say have mannerisms about them that you know. Like, even if you've never seen a Nicolas Cage movie, you know who Nicolas Cage is and how he behaves because of his memes, because of like viral videos of like Vampire's Kiss, like what you were just saying.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is able, like he's definitely able to carry a lot of those emotions, and he's able to like carry a lot of what Grug needs, to where he's like funny, but he's also able to convey a lot of those Nicolas Cage mannerisms at the same time without it ever feeling too over the top.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's great. It's very appropriate. It's really good. He did a good job. And they did a good job casting it.
All right, I got a couple more trivia facts for you.
Tight.
So this one comes from, again, all these come from IMDb. This movie was announced back in 2005.
Jeez.
Under the working title Crude Awakening, originally pictured as a stop-motion animation movie. Are you ready for who would have done this?
Oh, God, yes.
Aardman Animations. I don't know if I mispronounced that name. I'm sorry. For those of you guys that, to kind of put this in perspective, this is Wallace and Gromit, Chicken Run.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. It would have, as part of a 5-picture deal with DreamWorks Animation,
explosions.
John Cleese and Kirk DiMacchio. They're most famous for Quest for Camelot in 1998, Space Chimps in 2008. Had been working together on a feature based on Roald Dahl's story, The Twits. A project that never went into production. DreamWorks got a copy of the script and liked it, and invited Cleese and Domenico over to take a look at the company's idea to see if they had found something they would like to work with. They chose a basic story idea about 2 cavemen on the run. Yeah, originally this movie was pictured as a buddy comedy.
Wow.
An inventor and a Luddite, and wrote the first drafts of the script. With the departure of Erdman in the beginning of 2007, the rights for the film reverted back to DreamWorks, and Cleese went on to other projects.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that happened, and I have one other trivia fact here for you. Are you ready for this?
I am ready for it.
Grug's body language was based on Nicolas Cage's performance in Leaving Las Vegas 1995 and 2000's The Family Man, 2 movies which we have yet to cover.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And we talked about Family Man tonight. That's great. That's so cool.
Yeah. So Family Man and Leaving Las Vegas are 2 movies that we promise are coming eventually. And yeah. So, Micah, it begs the question, is the Croods worthy of high praise? You had to think about that. The like watching you watch this movie, like I don't know if you did that for dramatic pause, but like you watching, you're like, man, like we're probably like 20 minutes into this movie. It's not even like to like the part where
I know. And I was like, I love this movie. Yeah, no, I know. I remember. Yeah, no, I really do. I think it's worthy of high praise. I do. It would break my heart, honestly, to know that Nicolas Cage has done so few animated films and for any of them to just be bad. That would suck. Like, that would be unfortunate. I think this movie is a lot of fun. I think that it's very simple, which I want you to know that, like, I say that positively and negatively. Like, I think to some extent there could be a little bit more to it. But I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's got some great story development, character development, at least. But it definitely, I will say, it feels like a first film. I can really understand why it went on to be and do more than it is, because it feels largely like a setup.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this movie is definitely worthy of high praise. I definitely think that there are, to your point, like we were having this conversation. I was recently having this conversation with someone. I don't remember who it was, but like Nicolas Cage, even when he's in a bad movie, he's one of those actors that always puts in a great performance.
He does. Yeah.
Like I think by now, doing almost 40 episodes of this podcast, I've come to realize that Nicolas Cage might be in a bad movie like Outcast, or like other movies like the Kill Chain and stuff like that. and then I'm still like, you know what? Like Nicolas Cage was like still good in this movie. Like I don't feel like I wasted my time.
He's never the reason his movie is bad.
Yeah,
he's never. Not so far.
Now we haven't gotten to Left Behind yet, so we'll find out.
We've also not gotten to any of his war movies, and he didn't have a ton of those, but he does have a few.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how that's going to go. Neither of us are really fans of war movies, and I'm excited for later this year because Josh is not really a fan of westerns. But we've got a couple Nicolas Cage westerns coming out.
Yeah, those I'm curious about.
Totally.
Like, they're movies that like. It's not a genre that like I outright despise and will be like, oh, I'm never gonna watch this, because like there are definitely westerns that have come out in like the last 15 years where I'm like, this doesn't look terrible. And then I have fun with it. Like I had fun with Magnificent Seven. It wasn't a good movie, but it was still fun.
It's good. You got to see Ridiculous Six, Josh.
No. Coming back to this one, I think this is a strong performance. It's a strong entry to a franchise, and like even if they never gave us a sequel, I think there's enough to love about this movie, whether it's Cage or Reynolds or Stone, or like there's a lot of also too. I feel like there's a lot of relatability between the characters, especially Eep and Grug. I think their relationship is really relatable.
Yeah, it is.
Because I feel like every teenager goes through that like rebellion of like wanting to like grow past the family dynamics.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, if you guys have seen the Croods, do you guys think it's worthy of high praise? Do you agree? Let us know. And yeah, if you guys are parents, just also tweet to us and at Victims and Villains. Let us know about the mental health of being a parent, because we would love to hear you guys speak on that. So, that said, where can people find you online, sir?
Yeah, dude, you can find me literally at Mullet Stash on Instagram or at VHZest. Yeah, that's mostly it. That's pretty much all I use. You can, I guess, I don't know that I will add you back, but you can try adding me on Snapchat. It's mullet.stash. I use Snapchat a lot, so, go for it.
Yeah, so you guys can find me. I'm on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. I'm also on TikTok at Gent, Gent, Ghostface. And you guys can also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. So until next time, remember to keep on Cajun.